So at this point, I did go ahead and break down and pre-order the ROG Ally. However, I'm not 100% certain whether or not I'm actually going to hold on to that pre-order, so in a weird way I'm kind of in the same position that I was back when the Steam Deck was about to launch. I went ahead and pre-ordered it, not 100% sure whether or not I would keep it. Now obviously that worked out really well for me when it comes to the Steam Deck itself, because it was a crazy fun device and it allowed me to just kind of pursue an entirely new direction here on the channel. But with the Ally, I'm not quite sure how I feel about it. So that's what today's video is all about, is I kind of want to just go over a little bit about what the device is, some of the things that are kind of holding me back from taking the leap on it, and some of the things about it that are really appealing that do make me want to hold on to the device whenever it drops on June 13th. So let's go ahead and start off by talking about the Ally itself a little bit. Now there's a good chance you're already familiar with the hardware and the software because it's already been in the hands of a lot of creators at this point and it looks extremely promising. But if you're completely uninitiated, the Ally is basically Asus's answer to the Steam Deck, and it is a handheld gaming PC. While there's a lot of similarities with the Steam Deck, there are a few key differences that I feel like we should probably talk about. For starters, it does have largely the same button layout, although it does not have touchpads and it is lacking one pair of rear paddles. And unlike the Steam Deck, it does actually feature a 1080p screen that can do 120 Hz. It's also possible to hook it up to an external GPU, which is really slick if you're on the market to, drop some coin on that extra accessory. Personally, probably overkill for my purposes, but it's still pretty cool that you can do it. And finally, it does come in two different varieties, one being cheaper at $599 featuring a Ryzen Z1 processor and 256 gigs of storage, while the other, more expensive version is $699 and features a Ryzen Z1 Extreme and 512 gigs of storage. But putting aside the most obvious differences between the Deck and the Ally in terms of the hardware itself and the pricing for the device is the operating system that it runs, which is Windows 11 rather than some, say, bespoke operating system like the Deck runs. And putting all of this information together essentially leads to a device that is supposed to be at the low end about 50% more powerful than the Steam Deck, and at the high end, when you really have everything maxed out at full settings and you don't mind burning through battery life, 100% increase over what the Steam Deck can pull off. Now there are plenty of channels that have actually done technical breakdowns kind of showing this off, and in a lot of cases, yes, the Ally absolutely bests the Steam Deck in terms of performance, although there are some scenarios where the Steam Deck still comes out on top, namely when it's running at lower wattages, but by and large you can expect that this is exactly what's advertised, which is a really powerful handheld gaming PC. So now that we've talked a bit about what the Ally actually is, first let's talk about some hesitations that I have, and chief among them is one that's very personal to me, and that is, how would this actually fit into the content that I put out here on the channel, given the fact that I've put out about 60 or so videos that are just almost exclusively focused on the Steam Deck and the Steam ecosystem. Now, I don't think I'd feel exactly traitorous making a few videos about the Ally if I decide to keep it and talk about, my personal experience with it, or its capabilities, or how it compares to the Steam Deck based on my experience with that device, but it is something that I do try to keep in mind because, again, I have sort of built up this channel around the Steam Deck and the Steam ecosystem, so even though the Ally is a distinctly, different piece of hardware, I guess, I would still be covering Steam stuff, but yeah, I guess that is one of those areas where I feel kind of undecided on, whether or not I want to keep it, is would it actually fit into the workflows that I do here for the channel, and is there content there that I would want to pursue? And I don't know that it's a question that I could answer by myself, so I would probably need some of your feedback to really kind of sort through that piece of it. Now, more practically speaking, and from the perspective of a gamer, and I guess in a more objective way, something else that I have more concern about when it comes to just like, the practical running of the system is that Windows 11 operating system. Now, I've said before that one of the reasons that I, really enjoyed the Steam Deck is that I did not really have to dive into the world of Windows much, and as somebody who spends all day in that environment for my day job, whenever it's time for me to just chill out and play some games, I'm not real hot on the idea of fighting with the Windows operating system. And something that makes it doubly sort of hesitant for me, or I guess a reason that I would be kind of, slow to jump on the Ally train, is that this version of Windows 11 isn't one that's been, customized to work for handheld devices, although it's rumored that Microsoft is working on something like this. Rather, it is just Windows 11, and I'm sure there will be at least a few quirks to contend with. Now, obviously, there's plenty of tinkering that I've had to do with the Steam Deck in my time with that so far, but I'm not sure how hot I am on the idea of trying to tinker with the world of Windows when I just want to jump in and enjoy some games. And when it comes to diving into those games, I think the most likely use case for me for something like the Ally would be that it might be like a supplementary device to the Steam Deck for me, where I would use the Steam Deck predominantly for playing games and making channel content, but whenever I did just want to chill out with a game and maybe get better performance and a better visual experience, I may lean on the Ally. Although I will say that battery life is kind of a concern for me for the Ally. By all accounts, it is a system that's going to outperform the Steam Deck in a lot of the most common scenarios, but again, that performance is going to come at a cost, right? And I've already seen just how much AAA games can drain the Steam Deck battery, and considering they can look so much better on the Ally, I'm kind of curious like how long that battery is going to hold up, where instead of maybe 60 minutes to 90 minutes, I might be dropping down to like 30 or 45 minutes if I max everything out. I mean, granted, I tend to keep a beefy backup battery nearby anyways, but it is still something that I think about in terms of, is it a system I would actually want to take out into the wild with me, and how much game time would I really get if I'm really, just knee-deep in some AAA title that's very graphically intensive. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about, I guess, in the cons column of my dissection of whether or not to keep the Ally that I've pre-ordered. So let's talk about some of the obvious pros here. And even though I said that Windows 11 was a little bit of a negative for me, it's also kind of a positive, and actually not in, an insignificant way. Because while I've done videos on this channel about how to add like Game Pass via cloud streaming to the Steam Deck, I can actually install Game Pass games natively in a Windows environment. And it does seem kind of appealing to me to be able to take games that I've already been enjoying on Game Pass and streaming and had kind of a reduced experience, taking into consideration things like input lag or video degradation, and the idea that they could just be installed natively and run in a much more powerful system that's still a handheld, that's definitely appealing, and I don't want to undercut that. Not to mention, putting aside Game Pass, even though there are a ton of games that run just fine on the Steam Deck for me, I've definitely run across a few that do not run fine, and I'm sure they would be way more compatible and work just dandy in a true Windows environment. Some that spring to mind off the top of my head would be games like Obscure, Onimusha, Devil May Cry HD Collection had some issues as well. Watch Dogs, I was technically able to play on the Steam Deck, but had such like heinous audio issues that really I think it would be better suited if I could play it in a Windows environment and not have to worry about those compromises. So as much as I might loathe the idea of fighting with the Windows 11 operating system for tweaking performance, or fighting driver updates, or who knows what else might happen in the course of using that particular operating system, I can't deny it is also the most compatible operating system when it comes to games and making sure that they're going to run well, so definitely appealing on that front. Next up, I know I mentioned the battery life was a concern, and it still very much is, but that trade-off of performance really does look pretty appealing. Even though I've played a lot of really good-looking games on a lot of just really solid handhelds, a lot of those experiences were great because of the artistic merit of the game, or maybe it was just because it was, incredibly well optimized in the case of something like, say, Doom Eternal, where it just happened to run really well on the Steam Deck. But with the Ally, the idea that I could get like bolder, richer colors and then up to 120Hz display at 1080p, that's really nothing to sneeze at, and even though I always said that, graphics aren't the most important thing to me, it still would be nice to see what some of these games that I've only played on the deck would look like by comparison playing them on the Ally. And finally, to kind of bring the pros column full circle into my consideration of whether or not to keep the Ally, as far as the channel content goes, it may open up the door for some more interesting content opportunities. I'd still be talking about PC games predominantly here on the channel, but maybe it would be fun to start exploring some other hardware. It wouldn't be the first time that I've had somebody in the comments ask about covering something outside of the Steam Deck, so it might be fun to go ahead and make a few videos about a different piece of hardware, having only really covered the Steam Deck for the past, again, like 50 or 60 videos or so. But honestly, that's something I'm really gonna have to put a lot of thought into because, I take everything that I do on the channel very seriously and try to make sure that I'm putting out the best stuff possible and stuff that, you're going to continue to enjoy, so I guess that's something that I will have to figure out. So yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like I'm at a complete impasse in terms of whether or not to keep the Ally, and I guess I feel kind of like split 50-50, right? I see the pros, I see the cons, but I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with it yet. But hey, what about you? Are you planning on picking up the Ally? And if so, what is your justification for doing so? And I would love to hear if you're doing that in spite of the fact that you already have a Steam Deck, or if you're grabbing it as an alternative to the Steam Deck maybe. So please do let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch videos here. It really means a ton to me. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.